I hope you're going to enjoy the conversation we got today. You've seen, obviously, what it's described as in the panel. Without any further ado, I just want to introduce Ali Weiss. And again, as you can see there from Glossier, and she's been with the company for 4 years, and she's going to tell you more about it than I will. And obviously Maureen, who I've talked with, I had the pleasure of talking with before, with Rent the Runway. And I think what's exciting is to talk about the topics. I'm going to do a few slides just to kind of preamble what I'm thinking about, because I've already sat through 2 D2C panels today. And I think this is going to be a lot more meaningful for the reasons that you'll learn when you listen to what Maureen and Ali are going to be talking about. But one of the most important things to say is both of these organizations, these companies, are, I think, both a decade old, nearly a decade old, some a little bit longer, but they're both now valued at over $1 billion. In terms of sales, revenue, subscriber growth, then they're not always as keen to publicize everything because they're public companies, but you can ask questions. So the plan is I'm just going to click through a few slides, give you some perspective, and then use the opportunity. We're going to carve out at least 10 to 15 minutes at the end of some of the things we're going to talk about to allow you to challenge these tremendous entrepreneurs who are really working in an exciting way. Obviously, the growth of the business in the D2C world is remarkable. And you've all read the stats and you'll see it, but I also think there's a point to be made that we work with a lot of larger enterprise brands and global companies, and they're not asleep at the switch. And you can see here from this slide how many acquisitions are being made. But most importantly, you're looking at tremendous momentum on the right-hand part of the slide of continuing growth and development. In fact, you could say, with the digital era and the availability of data, that anyone can whip up a site. Someone told me Shopify met within an hour of getting your email address and a site domain name, you can be online as a business. Well, it's not that easy, as we're going to be hearing about. But you would say that actually the reason why it's been remarkable, that for the last 9 years, the US has had unprecedented growth. It's been remarkable. It's been a very strong economic environment. But the truth is, over 50% of the Fortune 500 companies have not generated profits and revenue growth over the last 3 years. So I've had a lot of debate with a lot of clients, a lot of industry organizations about why that is. I have my own personal points of view. Of course, the finger is often pointed at the marketing ecosystem. And many of the areas, whether it be fraud or bots or poor targeting, or lack of privacy. I also wonder if it's of the Fortune 500 companies, only 2% are run by women CEOs, only 6% of women are part of the C-suite, and only 13% of the boards are made up by women. That's just one point of view. I got those stats from Joanna Coles, who made damn sure that I did quote them exactly right, because that's her particular point of view, and it's another factor we need to consider. I mean, and you could say, well, it's changing in the VC world. It's changing with the new availability of capital. Well, it's not. And the more headlines I go through, and this is something I want to touch on, why is it so much harder? And in the FT today, there's a remarkable new D2C, and she's talking at 23 years old, why she's having to explain a business model. I know your founder said the same thing. Go back and talk to your wives. Go back and talk to your partners, your spouses, because you don't get it if you're a man and you're sitting in your shoes and you don't appreciate it. It's a fascinating story. D2C, you all know what that stands for. I have another interpretation based on the conversation I had with these 2 remarkable marketeers that we're going to talk to now, because it wasn't the fact that it was direct to consumer or direct to customer. It was another dimension, which is the data fueling. And then we're going to talk about that as remarkable. It was also about the total experience. It isn't just about customer experience. It's not about brand experience. It's not just about the marketing experience or the commerce experience. It's about the consideration for a very holistic and integrated way of working. Last but not least, there's a real focus on community, on real people who live in communities, and both these businesses get very proximate. They are not. Their narrative is defined, and their relationships are defined by the people who live in communities. So when we think about data fuel, one of the stats that I've seen, I mean, you see a lot of these stats, 80% of people are more likely to do business with brands that offer them the personalized experience. 52% will switch. And at the same time, there are concerns, and you can see the stats there, on the use of privacy, and if you're going to be significant. I thought this was an interesting point. I had this conversation. I talked to Salesforce, so I talked to Ali, and they said they'd done a recent study that said that 79% of experiences were as important as the products and services. The other point about community, I thought this was a great quote. I happened to meet the CEO of Walmart, and he made this point. I've now been to every state many times, and I've come to realize that a country is best seen not as a set of averages, but a collection of communities. And I wonder for those of us who are in the agency world and the marketing world sitting in this room, whether we're doing enough to challenge the narrative that it's about the coast, and it's about middle America, and it's about red states and blue states. And I'm just wondering how well we're doing moving from classic demographics or descriptors into something more significant that allows us to get close. Because that's the reality in 2030. 14 states in the 50 states of America will be the minority as a majority. Over 50% of the population in those states in the next 10 years. And by the way, of a total of America, 48%. So the truth is, it's a multicultural world. In fact, the US, and this is something to think about, will be the first mass multicultural democracy in the world. Now, is that a fact or a benefit? We're going to talk about that a bit. Gen Z, they expect so much more from brands. They expect the products to be purpose-driven. They will choose brands that support their lifestyle and their ambitions. They expect brands and businesses to bring about change in the world, to make the world a better place. And 67% do expect brands to take a stand on political issues. So what is our challenge? I think for those of us you've come along to listen to this conversation, I think the biggest challenge is how do we match up and exceed those growing expectations of consumers? Because the facts are that this is a time where we need to stop marketing at me as a buyer of products and services and start mattering to me as someone within a community or someone who has a passion. So with that thought, I'm now going to ask some questions. If we can go to the next slide. We don't know. Okay, we'll leave that there. Maureen, I'm going to flip it to you first, and then you're going to flip it to Ali, and we're going to see where it goes. One of the things that we talked about, and it came out in the conversation of the DTC panel I attended this morning, this whole dynamic between brand and performance. And somehow there's a conflict, there's some tension in that regard. And both of you in the conversations we had felt that it was a healthy tension, but you didn't see it as being something that was contradictory or conflicting, that you believed that there was a very strong data-driven, digitally native sensibility that was about the science of measurement and performance, but you cared deeply about the brand. But the brand wasn't just ads. It wasn't just storytelling. It wasn't just content. It was much more. Can you elaborate on that first?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'm a recovered digital media person. So I was telling Ali that Adweek was my jam for most of my career until I went to Rent the Runway. So I've missed you all. So I'm so thrilled to be here and be back. And, I think it's just this natural classic conflict of organizations want to get trapped in this, do we care about brand? Do we care about performance? And, honestly, in any interview process that we have at Rent the Runway, I am screening for someone who wants to look at the world in that division, which is, I think, a totally wrong way to approach marketing and thinking about communicating with customers in the future. I mean, guess what? It's both, and it's really hard, and there's constant navigation and trade-off, I think, to make sure that you are being as disciplined around the total experience, as you mentioned, which is ultimately what matters to our consumer, and I think all consumers. And, everything has to be measurable. And sometimes it's okay to do something and not have it achieve the metric that you want. But I think, we're obsessed with within our company, and that we're data-driven everything. And I think every company says that. But, I think every employee of Rent the Runway understands that, anything that we do, whether we invest money or our own time, we have to be able to measure that impact to make sure that we're doing the right thing. And I think that's very startup-like. I think, that's when you are a small company and every dollar matters and every moment of time of your small team matters, I think there's kind of just a discipline that's built in around that. And, we're almost 10 years old. I think our obsession is never losing that as we continue to grow and scale.
And what about on your business? Because you started life as almost as a media company and a content company before you made that transition to commerce. How do you manage that dynamic between the brand and performance-driven marketing?
So one thing I'd add is that we got to start, so we were founded 5 years ago, so we got to start in a landscape where we already knew that there was this challenge of balancing brand and performance. So getting to start from scratch and approaching it as a holistic endeavor versus a lot of companies that have been challenged to carve out a team to just focus on performance or just deliver results there. We were able to build that holistically, and that's how we built our team. We've built these synergistic conversations and models in which we talk a lot about balancing data-driven decisions around both hearts and dollars. And so not every measurement is only dollars driven. You can also measure a lot of brand love and brand passion through metrics. And so we really focus on the balance of those. And as we pursue certain initiatives, making the trade-offs between are we driving dollars or are we driving hearts? And going back to where we started as an editorial platform, we were content first, obviously, stories first, and we thought a lot about how content served as a conduit for conversation. And I don't think that's any different when you put money behind content. So for us, we think about when we're putting something in front of a customer, and I think with like-minded brands like Rent the Runway and Glossier, we're thinking that's not the only touch point. It's a holistic map of touch points that create conversation between brand and customer. And so being really thoughtful about the trade-offs, maybe there is a piece of content that won't be a conduit for conversation. And so do you test that in the world? Those are conversations we have all the time. Maybe it's going to get you the most efficient CAC out of that ad, but maybe it's not actually representative of the brand in the conversation. And so being really diligent about how we do content creation in service of conversation is something that's always been at the forefront of our philosophy.
And the other thing you talked about a lot was that your storytelling and the brand communication was in the spirit of conversation, which is about listening, and the brand behaving more, and you both said it as facilitator, not leader, not this sort of dictatorial sensibility that we know exactly what you want, we're going to serve it to you. Elaborate on that, on the skill of listening, because it's an easy thing to do, but it's a complicated thing to do as you scale the businesses to the size you have.
Yeah, I mean, I can start. I think, this is something we obsess over because we've grown quite quickly. And, our business, as I mentioned, is almost 10 years old, but our business has really transformed in the last 3.5 years, and that now 70% of our revenue is coming from the subscription part of our business, which is, we've created this new category of renting clothes, which didn't exist a decade ago. And now, we're lucky enough to be playing a daily role in our subscribers' life. The most engaged Rent the Runway subscribers wearing Rent the Runway 120 days a year. So we've kind of catapulted to this, incredible utility in her life. And there's a lot of, noise that is attached to that. And I think we're constantly obsessing around how do we make sure that, in all of that growth and, this kind of new business model, that we don't lose that closeness. I mean, these are like super tactical things, but for me as a leader, I look at, I think it drives some of my teams crazy, but I look at every single piece of app feedback that comes in. Like, I found that that's kind of like the perfect size focus group where I can actually like see it and resonate and get it, but it's a really big leading indicator for me of things that are going right or wrong. So I think in your own ecosystem, there's that kind of one pool of just like wisdom of crowds, customer feedback that you'll figure out what it is to tap into. And if you do something, if I looked at every piece of feedback, I'd be drowning in it and I'd be overwhelmed. But at our company at this moment in time, like that's kind of the thing that helps me feel like I've got a pulse on what she's really saying. I'm not just getting the roundup, the summary, the someone's lens on what they think she's saying. I think the other piece, which is super simple, I mean, every company has Slack now. We have a voice of the customer Slack channel that, I would guess probably now 200 people in our company are in. And it's just amazing if you just empower all of your employees to really champion what every customer is saying and make sure that it's being amplified within your organization. I am shocked at how simple of a tool that is, but how many incredible insights come from that. And I think it's not just the marketing team or the brand teams. Like, I feel like our engineers are some of the most vocal in our voice of the customer Slack. And I get excited about them understanding customer pain points because I know they're going to help us fix it in a way that will truly scale with our growth as a company. So, sometimes you want it to be this fancy thing. It's kind of the fundamentals of listening and making sure within your organization you have a discipline of listening that as a leader, you're setting that tone. I think that's worked.
Do you have that in your organization as well, that there's one super metric where you will pull that handle and scramble the whole organization because it counts more than any others?
We actually don't have one super metric, so we have a collection of metrics that are really important for us to look at. And the main source of those, so I think similar to you, we also have a Slack channel, and we do a weekly customer pulse that goes out to the entire company to ensure that people are really having a sense and have their finger literally on the pulse of the customer. But what I think is really important is actually a point you made in your introduction and that Maureen touched on, about that it's not about looking at averages, but it's looking at collection of communities. So your point about looking at app feedback, very similarly, we have a lot of different venues and where we converse with our customers. And so depending on what we're looking for or listening to, we'll go to certain focus groups. So for instance, we actually launched a few years ago a Slack group with 2,000 of our customers where they were able to talk to us and to each other. And what we always talk about is it's both G2C and C2C. So Glossier to customer relationships and customer to customer relationships, and you need the combination of them both. And we were really focused at the beginning. In addition, our customer service team, we refer to as the G team, and the customer experience team. And they're actually a part of the marketing team. So talk about hero metric, one of their least important metrics, and of course we're still looking at operational efficiency, is a cost per contact. They're actually encouraged to have conversation because there's all of this proof, especially in a two-dimensional digital world, when your customers are conversing with the brand, they're actually a lot more likely to stay loyal to the brand, to make a purchasing decision, to stay committed, to refer other people to the brand. And so we've built an entire team that's central to the marketing team and central to the perspective of the company that is centered on the voice of the customer. And so they're really the drivers of that and the advocates for that among the company that continues to be customer focused.
Because we also, when I think about building that in the design, that mentality, that also informed the consideration for experience. A lot of you both talked about the importance you're focused on to remove friction from the entire experience, wherever stage of the customer journey. How do you make sure, with all the changes in technology and the digital developments and new channels, here we are, Advertising Week, and there's so many different ways to engage, how do you make sure that always remains a truly seamless and customer-centric experience that is awesome?
That's a big question.
It is a big question.
Let me give an example of, I think, if we're truly listening to our community, which is an incredibly vocal, amazing community, and we're such fans of everything you guys do, because I think you guys have really pioneered in that C2C, which is so incredible. I mean, 94% of our customers have come to us organically. And that is really, people ask, what's your most effective channel? I'm like, humans talking in real life. Literally. It's word of mouth. It's like, it's anti-digital, which is so silly for me to say. But the original growth of the business, thank God, because we didn't have the capital in the beginning to spend on marketing, was, I give this anecdote of a woman wearing a beautiful rented red dress at a wedding, and the band is playing, and some nice fellow wedding guest is like, I love your dress. And like, all she needed to say in that moment was, thanks. Like, that was it. She didn't have any obligation. She paid to rent that dress, and she was probably wearing a great designer, and she could have just said, thanks, it's, Monique Lillier. But instead, over the blaring of the DJ or the, wedding band, she's acting as an infomercial for Rent the Runway. She's passing on this kind of incredible hack that she feels like she had figured out in renting for a special occasion. Flash forward to now, we're getting women dressed 120 days a year. Women in offices everywhere are really extolling the benefit of Rent the Runway in their daily life. And, I just feel I think everyone at our company feels so overwhelmingly grateful that we have a community of customers that are willing to do that. And so, for us, it's basically, if she asks us to do something or change or evolve, like, how quick can I do it? Is kind of our mantra. I mean, one example, our stores, we have 5 stores. They were originally showrooms, right? They were meant to kind of try on dresses for special occasions and book an appointment and have this kind of, very kind of showroom type experience. Flash forward to our subscribers, kept coming to our stores being like, can you get the inventory that I want to wear to work tomorrow? Like, I don't really need this ball gown this week. I need like appropriate clothes to wear, this week in New York, it's 90 degrees. Like, I don't need my coats. I need something that I can wear at Ad Week this week. So, even before we were ready, our subscribers pushed us to totally transform our store experience and really make it all about the extension of her physical closet.
Do you customize that across the country in different communities?
Yeah, it has to be merchandised in real time on a daily basis. Right. So, we're looking at demand signals that all of our subscribers are giving us and saying, in DC where we have a store, what do people want to rent right now? And that better show up every single morning and be merchandised perfectly within that store to really meet subscriber demand. And that was, for us, a big transformation. But, ultimately, that's what she wanted,
Are you going to go into manufacturing? Are you going to go into the adjacent space?
What's interesting is I think people don't realize, I can never get away from like a B2B and B2C world. I think it's the advertising salesperson in me. I mean, we have a whole B2B. I mean, we partner with over 600 brands. And they're partnering with us because they see this new consumer behavior that we've created. And they're looking for new distribution channels. Their traditional distribution channels have not been going in the right direction. So, we see ourselves as having to prove as much value to those brands as we are to our consumers. And so actually 30% of everything we buy is customized for us. And it's customized for us because we have given essentially inventory data to brands to tell them that what they're making doesn't hold up. But they don't know that from their traditional sales channel. All they know is sell-through and return rate. We're showing up and saying, hey, actually, after the 10th dry clean, this starts to fall apart. Like, did you never knew that? I wish you knew that. And I think for them, it's, there is power as a partner in data that fundamentally transforms and improves your partner's business.
And to do it quickly, because we talked about that on
it's
the phone.
in real time.
Real-time optimization. So when you discover those friction points, you're on it. And you're the same way, because obviously your manufacturing are all Glossier brand product basically designed and manufactured, but do you sell branded products as well?
Just our own brand.
Are you gonna, is it going to remain that way?
Yes, we're focused on the Glossier brand and continuing to grow that product
And
line.
you said, I've heard you say before, that you actually, because you are so acutely listening in real time, you're highly responsive to actually adapting not just the product itself, but the packaging, many elements of that. Do you want to elaborate on that?
I think one of the biggest benefits about where we are being direct to consumer is this ability to bring together all the experiences. So we think a lot about, I think very similar to you, about being an experience company and everything orienting around that. So that's how we get our feedback, is by creating experiences for the customer. So we think about them in three big buckets. There's our product experiences, so exactly what you were touching on, everything from the packaging to the formula to the stories that we tell to enable someone to feel like they're an expert and an owner of their routine. We have all of our digital experiences, which are the best place to iterate on immediate customer feedback. And then we have our offline experiences, these sort of like pinnacle retail experiences where people are able to go experience the brand in 3 dimensions. And the way all of those work together is the way that we're able to get our feedback. Because if you think about it, the products feed into the digital experience in which people are understanding what to buy, how to own their routine, how they're going to recommend a product to a friend. And then the way the products live within our store and within the context of what we refer to as our offline editors, the people who work in our stores and interact with our community. All of that feedback loop, both from the editors and the customers, go back to then fueling product, which then fuels, again, the customer experience and then fuels more and more people coming. So we think about this flywheel of brand to product to experience and back again. And there's customer input in every single part of that flywheel.
And as one of your customers, I mean, most people have been to your stores, hopefully. And if you haven't been, you need to go immediately. But, I would say, and I've taken my 72-year-old mother and my 6.5-year-old daughter to your store experience, and like magic is magic is magic. Like, I think sometimes we're so focused on what segment or what demographic. It's like, come on. Like, if you really know what you're doing and what your brand stands for, and how you want to create a truly magical experience, like I think you guys are just leading the way in such an incredible way of just how transformative and how much anyone of any age with any experience of any old school retail experience can just be wowed by how special.
Well, you raise a really important point there, which is the importance of intuition and creativity.
Yeah.
Because again, a lot of people will associate the D2C is extremely data-driven. The data tells everything. That influences. So it's all that intelligence the whole time. How do you, because obviously you're both, in fashion and beauty and owning one's beauty, and you've been very important in the narrative. The importance of creativity and maintaining that side, that right-hand brain in everything you do. How do you both deal with that?
I mean, I think a lot of it is just, not following a lot of the rules. I mean, I think, there's kind of been these rule books that people have followed for a really long time. And I think both our companies in unique ways have kind of been like, screw it. And I think, for us, that's a credit to, our founder, who is our CEO. I mean, one thing that has been transformative for our business, so reviews, customer reviews, from the day that we launched it, which we probably launched it in 2011, it has been the #1 driver of conversion. And launching those customer reviews of real women of all different shapes and sizes, speaking real speak about how the clothes they rented made them feel good, bad, indifferent, that was super controversial at the time. Like, it definitely set us back with the brand community and the designer world, and that was not like an okay thing to do at that moment. But Jen believed that was fundamentally the experience that we were creating that was going to matter to our community. And it wasn't like, oh, we'll take them down and we'll edit them, or no. It was like, this is our community. She's going to rent your beautiful clothes, and she's going to talk about it, and we're going to be a platform that empowers it because it's going to help other women. And that you, as a brand, should want to know all of this. You know, you shouldn't want to edit it or cherry pick it. And flash forward, here's where we are. I mean, it still is the number one thing that matters to anyone that's spending time on our site or app that makes their experience better.
Because it's authentic and you're not editing it.
Yeah, and now I think where every brand understands the importance of inclusiveness, it is, we hear from designers directly, they're obsessed over looking at the reviews. Like, that we've created this like data stream for them that is, and maybe they're not looking, a designer's not looking at the, analytics of it, but just even the emotional connection of they see a woman posting a selfie and explaining, it was perfect, but it was too tight on my right side as I tried to zip it. I mean, I think that has proven to be equally inspiring and really pushing creativity of our designers to create for all of our community.
Got it.
I think there's a really important point in there, which is we live in an age which everyone here is incredibly familiar with, where the voices of the customers are so much louder than the voice of the brand could ever be, right? And as many dollars as you put behind it, now we live in a day and age where everyone has their own platform to share their own opinion. And what we operate off of a lot is whether or not you're surprised negatively or positively, you're 10 times more likely to tell someone about it than your neutral experience. So that's the big role that your reviews play in it. But even more broadly, we think about that especially when people are walking to our stores, which when we first started rolling out our pop-up experiences, those were a really big investment for us. And so we thought that she needs to be surprised on this extreme end of the spectrum, because then what does that do? That facilitates conversation, that enables her to tell people about it. And as you go back to it, the most effective form of marketing is word of mouth, and people trust each other. And now more than any time, I think it's over 65% of millennials will take a recommendation from a stranger on the internet, right? So if they're able to validate that that person who wrote the review is similar to them, relatable, wears the same dress size, has the same makeup style, they'll take that recommendation. So there's a ton of power in that voice. And so for us, that's what fuels our creativity, because if you're able to surprise over and over and over again through your experiences, that creates this network effect of scaling your community. And that a lot of people would ask either of our brands, how do you scale your community? You're a certain size now, but there are tons of brands who are bigger than you, and you have aspirations to get there. And I think one of the biggest things is at the bottom of it, data and technology are really what fuels that authentic connection. And I firmly believe there's so much to be realized both with brands like ours and then brands across the world that can build one-to-one relationships at scale, authentic one-to-one relationships at scale, both brand to consumer and consumer to consumer, if you're building the right tools and experiences for them to receive that.
So to build on that, because I know there's probably some of you in the audience who are thinking either you've launched a D2C or you're thinking about it. I think one of the questions that comes into my mind is in the whole omni-channel area, because when one's considering taking, whether it be a pop-up shop or what, it's a different set of experiences you need in the retail space. We're seeing a lot of high streets that are just decimated because of the Amazon effect and the increasing development of that. How important as you develop both of your businesses, because you both mentioned the stores a lot and their importance, is now moving into physical retail going to be a significant part of the growth strategy?
I mean, for us, it goes back to the word experience, right? And that, I don't think we think about it in a kind of traditional sense of like, we need X number of stores. I mean, we've done a bunch of different things to just make sure that we are making having a subscription to fashion the easiest, most convenient thing in her life. I mean, as much as, consumers are in control of all content and media, I feel like the expectation for brands has never been higher. So even though, we're not in control, I feel like, it has to be insanely convenient and it has to be magical. Like, and any day that we don't deliver on both those for our community, like, we're in trouble, and I think her expectations of us are really high, and I think that's a good thing. I think it keeps us on our toes as a company in a really, really important way. I think for us, we've done things like, returning when you're relying on Rent the Runway, if anyone's a subscriber in the audience, the tax of returning becomes a tax, right? Like it's not just putting it back in your closet, like you have to get it back to us, and we try to make it as simple as possible. We send you a label, we have this beautiful, sustainable garment bags. We're trying to do our part to, have a positive impact on the environment as attached to, being your infinite closet in the cloud. But, we've heard kind of loud and clear from our subscribers, like, it's annoying, can you make it easier? And, not only did we create technology to allow her to kind of like seamlessly return in our store, meaning like in and out in like under 10 seconds, which is kind of what her expectation is around speed, but we also created these things called drop-off boxes and have done partnerships with WeWork as well as Nordstrom to be able to bring those to more communities. And for us, we were kind of like, is that going to work? Like, there's no inventory there like there is in our store. Will she really just want to go drop this thing off at a box? Well, turns out she does, because time is her most precious object. And anything that she can do that saves her time in the day and is more efficient is something that we know really matters to our customers. Right. So I think for us, you'll continue to see us innovate around any sort of physical presence that makes the experience of having a subscription to Rent the Runway as magical and seamless as we want it to be.
Got it. Thank you. Ali, what about
you? And for us, from an omni-channel perspective, the vast majority of our business continues to be on e-commerce. And what we feel like that allows us to do is create these unique offline experiences where we've really challenged the beauty retail landscape. If you think about walking into a traditional beauty retailer, it's brand after brand after brand and box after box after box. We actually don't have any of our sales inventory on the floor. So what you're really going in there to do is touch and feel and interact with our products, the people that are part of the Glossier community, and understand what the brand, how the brand exists in real life. If any practical person were to walk in there and say, how can you increase sales? You would probably want some sort of grab and go section, but that's not what makes our brand. And it's really amazing because the way people think about our stores is very different. They're buying product almost as a souvenir of that experience, right? Versus going in just to transact and leave and forgetting about the experience. And so we have the authorship to do that, given we're predominantly e-commerce, and engage people in a special way. There's no doubt to me that brands, consumer retail brands will continue to be omni-channel. Ever since the start of e-commerce, the ones that started the other way, brick and mortar onto e-commerce, will be and will continue to be. And I think there's magic in having all of those channels and touch points. It's the same as why you have lots of channels for marketing. You need to cross people's consideration patterns and awareness patterns in lots of different ways. And so I think having that dimensionalization of the brand is really important. But ultimately for us, the offline is always going to be optimized for experiencing. And we think that there's this really big pocket, in addition to a lot of the convenience desire of like emotional desire of consumers, that a lot of brands aren't fulfilling today because they're being so fast to act and provide. I mean, it's the Amazon effect, right? In providing convenience. And so humans still crave human interaction. And in this world that we're talking about of two-dimensional, like person-to-person interaction, people love going into our store for the sake of like human interaction and a sense of community and what the brand represents, which we definitely are focused on maintaining.
Yeah, well, I think that's going to be a theme throughout. We've obviously started Advertising Week now, but if we go back hundreds of years, people look at the sun and decide when it was time to have lunch, and then someone invented the clock, and then they were looking at the clock, and now we've got the screens, and everyone's looking at the screens. I'm not looking at your face. And I'm just wondering to what degree the humanity and technology are fusing together to create a new offering, because without doubt, there's a lot of anxiety and a lot of data that's sort of rising, when we're thinking about anxiety levels, suicide levels. There's a lot going on here that we need to unpack. But without getting too sidetracked on that, when I think about D2C, when I think about the importance then of being in the community, I want to unpack that a bit more, and then we'll take a few questions, because I remember when we talked before, you said to me, no, actually, Nick, it's not just our business, because we're now becoming the biggest dry cleaning company in the States.
Yeah.
So you have plants.
We think in the world, actually.
In the world now, in the world. So
ready for someone to challenge us on that, but so far that's a title none of us thought we'd have.
But that gives you the opportunity to also put back into the communities, to give more, because you're employing so many more people 100%. Than just a sort of online subscription model that's been managed by some great data scientists. No, you're really getting practical and proximate in communities.
I mean, if you think about our employee population, some of our most like critical talent at our company are spotters, dry cleaning experts. We obsess, as you all do probably in your leadership meetings, like, who are we going to hire? Do we have enough engineers? It's like, do we have enough expert spotters? And like, we're coming up with, how do we create a, dry cleaning university to create this next generation of tradespeople that we think are critical to the growth of our business, of truly like scaling, that really, really important skill set. So I think, it's for us, we have a very, very diverse employee population. It's one of the things that I love the most about our company. And I don't mean just diversity of thought and background and experience, but just diversity of the unique skills that different employees are contributing to, our success as a company. It's pretty magical.
What about you for community?
I mean, from the perspective of bringing in people, I really love what you touched upon before about it not being an average, but lots of individual communities. What we talk a lot about is it's a psychographic and not a demographic. And so your example of you can bring someone in their 70s into the Glossier store, or your 6-year-old daughter into the Glossier store, we actually believe that we're the first brand that's been passed up, which is really interesting. So if you look at all the legacy beauty brands, which were advertising top down, and they were bringing in traditionally the older generation that was passing it down, we're actually, because we're reaching that psychographic and those communities within the digital age, we're actually getting it passed up, and that's making us open new channels, open new types of ways of shopping our product. And so it's almost like we've flipped the model on its head in how we're building our community. And I think we think about that internally. We don't have as large of a company as you yet, and so from an employee-based perspective, we're still relatively small, but we think a lot about, I mean, even in our retail space, which I think is the best example, it's like customer experience and employee experience go hand in hand, because ultimately they're all part of the Glossier community, and ultimately they're all ambassadors of the Glossier brand. And so what we're looking to is build this passion around what we represent, and they're not coming to us because they love our lipstick and our mascara. They might, but they're coming to us because of the values that we facilitate and stand for, and they can relate to that. And I think that's something that's been lacking from other brands that they've seen around them.
Well, I think it's fascinating. That goes straight to the first question, which Ali, I think, has been written to you. Yeah. So can we look at the questions up on screen, please? I mean, the first one's come in, and thank you for asking. Is there a worry as your brand scale that they lose critical closeness to your customers gets lost? And how do you maintain that intimacy?
So I have two answers to that. I think from my perspective at least.
Can you see these on screen? Can you put the questions on screen?
We swear we're not making up questions.
We're not making them up. We're looking at them here.
And we've been peeking at them the whole time, so I feel like I've been trying to work my answers into answering these.
So, yeah. Okay.
I did touch on this point earlier, actually, which is this idea that technology enables us to scale one-to-one authentic relationships. So I think that's a really important thing, and how you set up the operations of listening and of facilitating conversation, which we've done both with our editorial platform Into the Gloss, with our G team. Our G team is really focused on meeting the consumer where they are. So when they inbound to us, we will answer them wherever they've come to us. Many companies today will say, thank you for your question, please email us at this email address. And that immediately creates this wall between the brand and the consumer. So you have to create scalable technology to enable that. And I think the second part is you also have to invest in human resources, right? So we have a community management team, and we have this G team, which are leveraging technology in order to do it at scale, but there's truly humans behind those answers. And yes, of course, there's technology to predict that if someone asks a question about their shipping, their order, or their status, we can pull that up really quickly, but ultimately there's a human touch on every single part of those interactions. And I don't think today that you can get away with skirting around that expectation from the consumer.
What you've got a direct question for you now, which is it, you've switched it. Where is it? No, we had the specifically rent one way. Where's it gone? There you go. As vintage clothing, can you see these? Yeah, you see it. So vintage clothing, even mass market stores like the Loft are entering. How will Rent the Runway continue to differentiate itself?
Well, it's been exciting for us over the last 6 months, because for a long time we didn't have competitors. I think this business was, not really for the faint of heart and its intensity. And now, I think because people see the kind of mass consumer adoption of what we're doing and people really embracing rental, we have competitors for the first time. So I think we're like gleeful, we're like excited about that, because I think for us it means that we don't have to convince anyone anymore that the consumer, it's real, and there's all the analysts writing reports, projecting how I'm like, this is so awesome, because for a long time, I've only been at the company 4 years, but even when I got there, there was like a lot of, this isn't like a fad for like a few weird people that are going to do this. Like, we promise they're very diverse, incredible group of women. We ship to 76% of U.S. zip codes. This is something that is truly caught on. I think if we think about how we're going to continue to differentiate, it comes down to two really important words. The first is assortment. So we believe that if we have the world's best infinite closet full of incredible designer clothing, and designer means different things to different people, that we will be the best subscription, and that it will be what people want. And I think we think, because we collect so much data around every single piece of clothing that our subscribers wear, we feel like we can deliver a truly personalized experience of what your closet in the cloud should be. And so, Ali's designer matrix might be 30 brands that are relevant and meaningful to you. Mine might be 57, someone else maybe 125. Like, you know, I think we feel like that's really in our grasp to deliver that kind of personalized brand matrix. And then the second word is really access. It's just how do we make it easy and convenient? Sure. And that I think we're laser focused on continuing to do those things really well. And we think that will enable us to stay ahead of the pack.
Ali, I think this question is directly for you, which is about being green and how companies make it a priority. What's your stance as a manufacturer of beauty product, cosmetics? How do you approach this?
So I think for any physical product company, this is a big question. I'm sure it's relevant for you guys. And also consumer expectations are across a range of a massive spectrum of considerations. So ever since we started, we've heard our customers' concern, and I think a lot of people can relate as it's really picked up over the past probably 2 to 3 years. And we always say that for someone who's starting a brand, our advice would be put this at the forefront of your considerations, because building operations and or a philosophy on the back end is really, really hard. Yeah. And so what we've been really excited about is we get real-time feedback on what's important to the consumer. And you're never going to please everyone. So something that I'm really proud of that we did this past year is we got a bunch of feedback on our iconic pink pouches, which everyone loves, and they're a representation of the brand. But many people who are loyal customers say that they don't want multiple pink pouches. They just want a few, that they keep one in their bag and one in their bathroom, wherever it might be. So we launched, very simple, but we launched a limited packaging option. And what's interesting is consumers don't necessarily perceive how much, and I'm sure you run into this a lot, how much work it is to make that type of change that's going to impact the environment.
Sounds so simple, but in reality.
It sounds so simple. So what we do is we really listen to our customers and what they're looking for, and we're also trying to stay ahead of it. So on the product development side, there are a ton of different standards around clean and different types of packaging standards. We actually just had in our office on Thursday and Friday what we called our Sustainability Day, where we had, I think, a dozen different vendors come in to display all of their innovative packaging options, shipping options, just to spark ideas and thought, which I'd say it's interesting for a company that's operating our size, we're able to do. If you're a large company already and you have those strategic vendors, you're limited to their innovation. And so we're able to take a step back and say, in 5 years from now, where do we want to be? Who are going to be our best partners to do that, since we're in the building phase? And so we have a lot of opportunities to continue to do that.
So a question for both of you, because I know, and again, you're asking, there's some fantastic questions here. We're not going to be able to reach them all. One important one, though, is on the funding, because someone's made a comment of the fact that 2 to 3% of funding for female startups. How did you both, and maybe this is obviously for founders as well, but you've been there long enough to know, and you're always looking for further investment. How have you navigated the challenges around funding and growing businesses when it's been harder, unfairly harder, for women-owned businesses to raise money? Or do you even agree with that?
Yes. I mean, I think Jen, our founder, has taught me a lot about, she's raised $337 million at Rent the Runway, and I think none of it has been easy, despite the success. I mean, the business was on the front page of the New York Times the first day it launched. Like, despite all of, 94% of our customers have come organically. Like, I think even when the data was there, I think there was still always, there were uphill battles, and it came down to, I talked to my wife, and she wasn't really sure that she would be into renting. It's like, well, I'm showing you reams of data telling you about all different women of all different psychographics and demographics that are interested in actually doing this today. Not like we're going to try to get them to do it, like they're literally doing it. So, I honestly think what's happened over the last 2 years is what's really important, which is people are finally talking about it. And I think, that is, it's hard to do. And I think sometimes for female founders, it's like they have a lot to do. I think they realize, I just have to prove it and do it, and that's how it's going to change.
So what's the final to leave that as a key lesson for the female founders here in the audience? Yeah,
I mean, I think it's hard. Listen, there's already so much on everyone's plate, and now to add, like, be a champion for this and, go tell these stories. But I think, watching Jen do that over the past few years and just be much more vocal about it, it's amazing, I think, the impact that's had on not only the investors that we talk to, but, the next generation of entrepreneurs who I think she hopes that, by her being vocal and really being honest about, it looks so beautiful on the surface in a lot of ways, but even with success stories, and really high growth and amazing things happening at both our companies, it doesn't feel that way the whole way through. And I think just that authenticity around the topic is, a way to get people's attention and really start to change some of these things for the long term.
Ali, for you and Emily, How did you navigate it, and what's your final thought for the audience in terms of any female founders who are looking to raise money?
Yeah, I mean, I think ambition and perseverance are really key. It's really fantastic that people have started talking and bringing awareness to the topic, but it doesn't change that we're going to have to continue to work hard to change what the data says and what the reality is. And ultimately, investors are partners, right? So to go out there, you have to be equally discerning in many ways of, do I want to be a partner with you? Do I want to work with you? And so my advice very much would be, make sure that when you're sitting across the table from someone asking them to be a part of your business, you have similar values.
Good point. So it's not just about the cash.
Right. No.
It's
Yes.
business
Value
partnership for
alignment.
the longer term.
Yes, business partnership for the longer term and understanding what the landscape looks like today. Obviously, there are fewer people who are willing to be that partner, but being persevering and being ambitious about that there are partners out there, and now that people are aware of this, there's a much bigger opportunity for people to have productive conversations. And what we always push for is, we used to get that feedback, oh, I'll take this bag of products home. It's actually, you can use that product too. I mean, I'll say my husband's a Glossier girl, and he uses a whole suite of Glossier skincare routines. And yes, I did just say that.
I
So,
love it.
I mean, it's important, right? Like, Nicole, I'm going to get you some product, and your routine's going to change after today.
Well, that's a challenge. Listen, I couldn't be more enthused and inspired by talking to both of you, because it's a time, it's not just about the technology, it's a time that we can see a different face to capitalism in terms of who's driving it and what's important, and having it more inclusive and thinking about making the world a better place. And both your businesses, not only are you disrupting the giants in the industry and creating new categories, you're clearly having a lot of fun along the way. So thank you very much for your time and talking for everyone here today.
Thanks, everyone.